in the quiet, candlelit study rooms of Ingolstadt, Bavaria, 1776, a man named Adam Weishaupt began to shape an idea that would echo across centuries. He was a professor of canon law at the University of Ingolstadt, a scholar surrounded by books yet constrained by the strict structures of church and monarchy. Supporters of the Illuminati conspiracy believed that Weishaupt, dissatisfied with the rigid authority of kings and clergy, created a secret society designed to influence the course of human history, a network of thinkers hidden in plain sight. Critics argue, however, that Weishaupt's order was nothing more than an intellectual club, a product of Enlightenment ideals seeking rational reform rather than world domination. Evidence cited by historians suggests the Bavarian Illuminati was disbanded within a decade, never rising to significant political power. Yet, the myths surrounding the group began to take root almost immediately. Weishaupt's society, initially composed of a few devoted students, embraced the principles of reason, liberty, and education. They swore oaths and used symbols to signify rank and secrecy. Supporters believe these practices allowed the order to infiltrate broader networks, such as Freemasonry, and eventually plant seeds of influence in politics, economics, and religion. Critics, however, highlight that these claims are speculative, largely unsupported by contemporary documents. The conspiracy theory gained momentum because the Illuminati's rapid rise coincided with turbulent times. Europe was a continent of revolution and reform. The American colonies had declared independence, France teetered toward upheaval, and monarchies across the continent faced challenges from reformist thinkers. To believers, this was no coincidence. The Illuminati were pulling the strings behind these seismic changes, orchestrating events to reshape society. Historians debunk many of these claims, pointing out that societal shifts were the result of widespread intellectual and political movements rather than the machinations of a secret cabal. Yet, the allure of a hidden hand directing history proved irresistible. The story of the Illuminati became a template for future conspiracy theories, a framework where chaos in the real world could be attributed to a singular, unseen power. Weishaupt himself became almost mythical. Supporters believe he escaped persecution and continued his work in secret, influencing secret societies across Europe. Critics argue that these tales are imaginative extrapolations, romanticized fantasies that grew in pamphlets and later publications warning of clandestine dangers to public. By the late 18th century, rumors of the Illuminati began to spread beyond Bavaria. They became synonymous with secrecy, intelligence, and potential manipulation. European rulers, threatened by reformist ideologies, sometimes conflated revolutionary thinkers with conspirators. The Illuminati, whether as a small intellectual society or as a foundation of a global plot, had entered the imagination of Europe's populace, and soon the world. Supporters believe the seed sown by the Illuminati continued to grow long after the group's official dissolution, influencing revolutions, secret societies, and eventually popular culture centuries later. Critics maintain that these ideas are a product of imagination and fear, amplified by political propaganda, sensationalist writings, and human fascination with hidden knowledge. As the 18th century ended, the Illuminati were officially dead, but their legend had begun to flourish. In the shadows of history, a narrative emerged, a story of hidden power, intellectual rebellion, and clandestine influence. Whether truth or myth, this story planted the idea that events in the world were sometimes orchestrated by unseen forces, sparking curiosity, fear, and fascination. And so, the stage was set for the first believers, the writers, and the chroniclers who would take this small Bavarian society and turn it into a global symbol of secret control. The question remained, how did a handful of thinkers in Bavaria grow to become the subject of conspiracy theory that spanned centuries? Because every legend needs followers, and every shadow needs eyes to watch. The year is 1780, just a few years after the official dissolution of the Bavarian Illuminati. Yet whispers of the secret order did not vanish. Supporters believe that the ideas sown by Adam Weishaupt had already begun to spread to the minds of curious and ambitious individuals across Europe. Scholars, free thinkers, and members of other secret societies became the first believers, carrying the Illuminati philosophy of reason, liberty, and clandestine influence far beyond the walls of Bavaria. Critics argue that the notion of first believers is largely a construct of conspiracy theorists. They point to the lack of documented evidence that the Bavarian Illuminati continued in any meaningful form after 1785. According to historical records, most members either abandoned the order or were absorbed into other intellectual societies without any overarching plan for world control. Yet, the legend persisted. Stories of secret meetings, cryptic symbols, and coded writings captured the imagination of Europe's elite and the public. Supporters believe that the Illuminati found fertile ground among the Freemasons. Both organizations valued secrecy, structured ranks, and initiation rituals. While Freemasonry had existed for centuries, the Illuminati allegedly introduced a more politically radical agenda, one focused not only on enlightenment and morality but also on influencing governments from the shadows. Critics argue that the supposed merging of Illuminati ideas with Freemasonry is speculative. There is no verifiable evidence that the Bavarian Order ever fully infiltrated Masonic lodges. Nevertheless, for believers, this connection was the first step toward a larger global influence. The spread of these ideas coincided with turbulent political landscapes. Revolutions were in the air. The American colonies were in their final years of independence. France was heading toward upheaval, and social unrest simmered across Europe. Supporters claimed the Illuminati seized these opportunities, recruiting thinkers, advisors, and young nobles who would later play roles in shaping society. Critics, however, insist that attributing historical events to the influence of a secret society is projection. Humans naturally seek patterns and hidden causes in chaotic events. Some early believers were inspired by the Illuminati's core philosophy, that reason could overcome superstition, that knowledge could empower humanity, and that secrecy was a tool, not a weapon. These followers organized small groups, often meeting in private homes or backrooms of cafes, discussing philosophy, governance, and reform. Supporters claimed that these gatherings laid the groundwork for covert networks that would influence politics and economics over the next century. Critics argue that these were ordinary intellectual salons, typical of the Enlightenment, with no evidence of global orchestration. As these early believers spread the story of the Illuminati, rumors multiplied. Some spoke of coded letters traveling across borders. Others hinted at secret societies within universities or governments. Supporters believed that by the end of the 18th century, the Illuminati had become more than an idea. They were a myth with teeth. Even as European authorities dismissed or suppressed them, the story persisted, whispered in taverns, libraries, and salons. Critics argue that much of this was exaggeration, fueled by fear of secret societies and political paranoia rather than concrete evidence. The allure of mystery proved irresistible. Every new revolutionary, every sudden shift in power, every mysterious benefactor became a potential Illuminati agent in the minds of supporters. And so, a legend grew, a network of enlightened thinkers, invisible yet omnipresent, shaping the course of human events. Critics remind us that this narrative is fueled more by human fascination with secrecy than by historical fact. By the early 19th century, the idea of the Illuminati had crossed oceans. Supporters believed that immigrants carried stories and symbols to America, while European exiles spread tales across intellectual circles. Even without a tangible organization, the concept of a hidden society controlling world affairs had taken root in the popular imagination. The stage was set for the next phase, events and evidence that supporters would later interpret as proof of the Illuminati's influence. Real or imagined, these moments would fuel the legend and cement the Order's place in conspiracy lore. Because once stories take hold, they grow, and the line between fact and myth begins to blur. The dawn of the 19th century brought a world in turmoil. Revolutions, wars, and political intrigue painted the continent in shades of chaos and opportunity. Supporters of the Illuminati conspiracy believe that these events were not mere accidents, but the visible ripples of an unseen hand. According to this perspective, the Bavarian Illuminati had already sown seeds of influence, and now, through carefully placed individuals and subtle guidance, their impact could be traced in the upheaval shaping Europe and beyond. Critics argue that attributing historical upheavals to a secret society stretches evidence beyond credibility. Wars were fought, revolutions ignited, and empires toppled because of human ambition, economic strain, and ideological conflict, not the designs of shadowy conspirators. Yet the coincidence of significant events aligned with Illuminati lore proved irresistible to theorists. One of the earliest incidents cited by supporters is the French Revolution of 1789. The storming of the Bastille, the radical restructuring of government, and the execution of monarchs were, they argue, far too coordinated to be mere chance. Illuminati theorists point to alleged connections between revolutionary leaders and secret societies influenced by Weishaupt's teachings. Critics dismiss these claims, noting that revolutionary ideals arose organically from societal discontent, economic hardship, and Enlightenment philosophy, with no verified ties to the Bavarian order. Supporters also highlight mysterious correspondences, coded messages, and symbols supposedly found in the personal papers of influential figures. Triangles, eyes, and cryptic seals became proof, in their eyes, their secret network was guiding history. Critics counter that such symbols were common in intellectual and religious contexts at the time, and their association with the Illuminati is largely speculative. Across the Atlantic, the creation of the United States Constitution is another event cited by conspiracy enthusiasts. They argue that the influence of secret societies, including those inspired by Illuminati principles, shaped the nation's foundation. While it is documented that Freemasonry played a role in early American networks, critics insist that the leap to a global Illuminati conspiracy is not supported by credible evidence. In addition to political events, supporters claim that financial systems, banking networks, and early industrial ventures were subtly guided by adherents of Illuminati philosophy. The notion of hidden financiers and secret benefactors became recurring themes in pamphlets and early writings. Critics argue that financial growth during this period was driven by trade, innovation, and social demand rather than covert orchestration. As stories circulated, pamphlets sensationalized the notion of a secret, omnipresent society. Writers described clandestine meetings, pledges sworn in candlelight, and cabals manipulating governments. These narratives blurred the line between historical fact and imaginative fiction, feeding the belief in a pervasive, unseen influence. Supporters cite coincidences, sudden political shifts, and unexplained events as further evidence. Every revolution, crash, and assassination carried, in their view, the invisible fingerprint of the Illuminati. Critics insist that humans naturally seek patterns in chaos, and these connections are often retrospective, constructed to fit the narrative of hidden control. The spread of the legend was fueled by public fear and curiosity. Governments wary of secret societies often exaggerated threats, inadvertently giving the myth more weight. Every mention in newspapers, pamphlets, or sermons added layers to the narrative. Supporters believe that this attention served the Illuminati's purpose, shaping perception rather than action. By the early 19th century, the myth had evolved. No longer just a small intellectual society, the Illuminati became a symbol of hidden power in a rapidly changing world. Real event provided the canvas, believers' imagination supplied the brushstrokes. And as Europe advanced toward industrialization, empire building, and modern governance, the legend of the Illuminati became inseparable from stories of upheaval. Real or imagined, their influence, supporters argue, was everywhere. Critics caution that these interpretations reflect human fascination with secrecy more than historical reality, because whenever shadows grow in the public imagination, fear and fascination walk hand in hand. The year is 1810, and Europe hums with whispers. From the cobblestone streets of Paris to the quiet libraries of Vienna, stories of the Illuminati have taken hold in the public imagination. Supporters believe that by this time, the Bavarian Illuminati had evolved from a dissolved society into an invisible force, a network of ideas capable of inspiring both fear and fascination. Its philosophy, reason, secrecy, and influence was interpreted by many as a blueprint for shaping governments, revolutions, and institutions behind the scenes. Critics argue that much of the panic was fueled by exaggeration and the human tendency to seek hidden patterns. Historical records show that the Illuminati, as an organized entity, had long ceased to exist. Yet the allure of secrecy proved irresistible, transforming Weishaupt's small intellectual circle into the stuff of legend. Across Europe, newspapers and pamphlets began reporting alleged Illuminati activity. Some claimed the secret society had infiltrated Freemasonry, universities, and even royal courts. Supporters believe these reports reflect genuine clandestine influence. Critics insist they were sensationalized stories meant to stir anxiety among citizens and control public perception. Public reactions varied widely. Among radicals and intellectuals, fascination often became admiration. The Illuminati were seen as symbols of enlightened rebellion, challenging monarchies and religious authority. To these early believers, the society represented knowledge, strategy, and progress hidden in plain sight. Conversely, governments and clergy grew wary, labeling the order a dangerous threat. Edicts were issued, texts were banned, and scholars were investigated. Supporters believe these crackdowns only strengthened the legend, giving the Illuminati a shadowy aura that seemed omnipresent. Critics highlight that authorities were responding to fears of secret societies, not evidence of global conspiracy. Rumors soon intertwined with real-world events. Prominent politicians, financiers, and revolutionary figures were accused of being Illuminati agents. Evidence often consisted of circumstantial coincidences, a symbol carved into a building, a letter misinterpreted, or a sudden political shift. Supporters saw these as proof of influence. Critics insist these interpretations were projections, human beings searching for meaning in randomness. Fear of hidden power fueled public debates, pamphlet wars, and conspiracy tracts, each amplifying the myth. Supporters argue that even at this stage, the Illuminati had achieved its purpose, shaping perception. The narrative of a secret cabal controlling society was embedded in collective imagination, independent of reality. Critics counter that the fears reflected societal insecurity during turbulent times, not evidence of an actual global network. Across cities and towns, ordinary citizens whispered about secret plots, unseen manipulators, and world-altering schemes. Supporters claim that this anxiety itself demonstrated the Illuminati's reach. Critics see it as a natural outcome of human curiosity, fear, and imagination. By the 1820s, the Illuminati had transcended its historical origins. Supporters believe it had become a lens through which people interpreted revolutions, assassinations, and political intrigue. Whether as a fearsome manipulator or misunderstood philosophical order, the society now existed in the public consciousness. And as Europe moved toward modernity, the stage was set for the next chapter, the rise in popularity and influence of the Illuminati legend, as stories spread from scholars and politicians to the general public. Because once curiosity becomes fear, legends begin to shape reality. The early 19th century was a period of transformation. Europe and the Americas were experiencing sweeping political, social, and technological changes. Revolutions had redrawn borders, industrialization was reshaping cities, and ideas of freedom and equality were spreading. Supporters of the Illuminati conspiracy believe that it was during this era that the legend truly rose to prominence, a society no longer confined to secret manuscripts or whispered rumors, but a myth with far-reaching influence, shaping the way people interpreted history itself. Critics argue that much of this perception is a result of storytelling, fear, and imagination. The historical Illuminati had already dissolved decades earlier, yet the myth persisted. Newspapers, pamphlets, and public debates helped perpetuate the narrative, feeding both fascination and anxiety. Supporters claim this was evidence of an enduring, invisible influence. Critics maintain it was simply human fascination with secrecy and power at a time of rapid societal change. One of the key moments in the rise of the Illuminati's popularity was a widespread publication of conspiracy literature. Books and pamphlets, often sensational in tone, described secret meetings in candlelit chambers, pledges sworn under enigmatic symbols, and hidden hands guiding governments. Supporters believe that these stories reflected real networks of influence that had survived the Bavarian crackdown. Critics argue that such accounts were largely fictional, designed to sell books and attract attention, preying on public fear of the unknown. Freemasonry, already a well-established institution, became closely associated with the legend. Supporters contend that the Illuminati infiltrated Masonic lodges, spreading its philosophy and gaining influence among politicians, intellectuals, and bankers. Critics, however, point out that the connection between the Illuminati and Freemasonry is largely speculative. While there were shared symbols and rituals, documented evidence of systematic infiltration is minimal. Across continents, reports of mysterious correspondences, unexplained financial maneuvers, and political shifts further fueled the legend. Supporters claim that influential figures, from revolutionary leaders to financiers, were secretly guided by Illuminati principles. Critics argue these events were products of circumstance, human decision-making, and social change, rather than evidence of a clandestine global network. The rise in popularity was not limited to the elite. By the mid-1800s, the idea of the Illuminati had entered popular culture. Stories of hidden societies appeared in newspapers, pamphlets, and public lectures, inspiring both fear and curiosity. Supporters argue that this shows a society's reach, proving that even without a physical organization, its philosophy and influence persisted. Critics insist this was a natural result of urbanization, literacy, and the spread of sensational stories. The growing public fascination also coincided with social upheavals. Revolutions, assassinations, and financial crises were interpreted through the lens of secret influence. Supporters believe the Illuminati orchestrated these events from behind the scenes, subtly steering history toward an agenda of enlightenment and control. Critics argue that these interpretations are retrospective, a way for people to impose order on chaotic historical events. By the late 19th century, the Illuminati had become a cultural phenomenon. Supporters believed its influence had spread worldwide, inspiring new secret societies and shaping political discourse. Critics continued to debunk these claims, emphasizing the lack of concrete evidence. Yet, the legend endured, embedded in the imagination of both the educated elite and the general public. And as the world entered a new era of communication, global conflict, and industrial might, the stage was set for a pivotal moment, the major turning point when the Illuminati conspiracy would move from whispered rumor to mainstream fascination, capturing the attention of scholars, writers, and the public alike. Because when a legend resonates with fear, curiosity, and ambition, its influence grows far beyond the bounds of reality. The year is 1914. Europe stands on the edge of chaos. Assassinations, alliances, ultimatums. The world's first global war is about to erupt, and once again, whispers rise from the shadows. Supporters of the Illuminati conspiracy believe this was no coincidence. To them, World War I was not born of nationalism or political tensions alone, but of orchestration. Behind throne rooms, armies, and flags, they argue, stood a hidden cabal, the unseen engineers of history. Critics, however, argue that attributing the First World War to a secret society is a stretch. They insist the causes were tangible: political rivalries, militarization, and a complex web of alliances. Yet, for believers, the war's very scale and sudden onset seemed to confirm centuries of subtle planning by the Illuminati. Stories circulated of meetings in dimly lit rooms, letters exchanged in code, and symbols mysteriously appearing in the backgrounds of political and military imagery. Supporters claimed these were evidence of the Illuminati guiding events to reshape empires, redraw maps, and set the stage for modern global power structures. Critics countered that these were coincidences, misinterpretations, or embellishments fueled by sensationalist writing. The public's fascination grew as propaganda and rumor intertwined. Supporters point to the sudden rise of industrialists, financiers, and political figures who seemed to wield disproportionate influence over wartime policies. Some argue that these individuals were Illuminati agents, advancing a hidden agenda under the guise of national interest. Critics respond that economic and political opportunities always emerge during periods of conflict, and no verifiable links to the Illuminati exist. Across continents, the idea of a hidden hand manipulating global events resonated with citizens. Soldiers in the trenches, families awaiting news, and the press reporting daily casualties became part of a collective imagination where fear of the unseen combined with tangible horrors. Supporters believe the Illuminati thrived in this uncertainty, their legend growing as the world itself seemed to mirror their supposed design. Even after the war, as nations struggled to rebuild, stories of hidden control persisted. The Treaty of Versailles, the shifting of borders, and the collapse of empires were interpreted by believers as evidence that the Illuminati were orchestrating history on a global scale. Critics insist these outcomes resulted from human negotiation, power struggles, and the chaotic aftermath of unprecedented destruction, not secret manipulation. In the cultural imagination, the Illuminati's presence became inseparable from modern upheaval. Literature, theater, and early films began to reflect themes of secret societies controlling the world. Supporters argue that this integration into popular media shows the Order's influence was no longer hidden, it was pervasive. Critics counter that art often dramatizes fear and power, and the Illuminati became a convenient narrative device rather than historical fact. By the mid-20th century, the Illuminati had fully entered mainstream consciousness. Supporters believe the First World War marked a major turning point, the point at which the society, or at least its legend, stepped out of obscurity into global awareness. Public fear, fascination, and imagination became the new instruments of power. Critics warned that this turning point was a psychological, not historical, phenomenon. The legend had become larger than any evidence, and the real society, if it ever existed, had long vanished. And as the world moved toward technological advances, political revolutions, and the rise of global communication, the stage was set for the Illuminati myth to reach its peak, capturing the attention of millions across nations, decades, and even centuries. Because when perception becomes reality in the minds of millions, legends can shape history as powerfully as armies. The 1960s and 1970s marked a period when the legend of the Illuminati surged to its cultural zenith. Supporters believe that in this era, the society, whether real, imagined, or symbolic, had captured the collective imagination of the public like never before. Across nations, in books, newspapers, and the growing medium of television, the notion of a hidden hand controlling governments, economies, and even cultural trends became a fixture in popular discourse. Critics argue that this popularity was fueled less by evidence and more by societal anxiety. The Cold War, the threat of nuclear conflict, political assassinations, and the rise of mass media created fertile ground for conspiracy theories. In such an environment, it was almost inevitable that legends like the Illuminati would flourish. Yet, for believers, these turbulent times confirmed everything society had long been accused of: orchestrating events from behind the scenes, shaping public perception, and manipulating power structures globally. High-profile publications and sensationalist authors cemented the society's reputation. Books claimed that presidents, world leaders, and influential financiers were secret members, directing the fate of nations without public scrutiny. Supporters saw patterns in politics, economics, and social change as evidence that the Illuminati were more than myth. They were the architects of modern history. Critics argue that these conclusions were speculative, often relying on coincidence, pattern-seeking, and selective interpretation of events. The music, art, and entertainment of the era reflected this growing obsession. Supporters suggest that hidden symbols, coded messages, and allusions in cultural works were subtle confirmations of the Illuminati's reach. Critics counter that these are creative interpretations, the result of human imagination reading meaning where none was intended. As a conspiracy theory gained traction, it began to influence communities, discussions, and even political debates. Supporters argue that fear and fascination with the Illuminati shaped public consciousness, influencing how people interpreted world events. Every economic crisis, political scandal, or technological breakthrough became another thread in the imagined tapestry of control. Critics maintain that these interpretations are retrospective constructions, projecting narrative onto unrelated events. The peak of belief saw a global spread. From Europe to North America, South America, and beyond, books, lectures, and media mentions amplified the legend. Supporters believe that this global recognition was evidence that the Illuminati's influence had achieved its maximum reach, not necessarily through action, but through the power of ideas. Critics insist it was a reflection of modern media's ability to circulate compelling narratives, rather than proof of secret governance. Even skeptics could not ignore the cultural weight of the narrative. The Illuminati had become a symbol of hidden power, of the anxiety that modern individuals felt about forces beyond their control. Supporters argue that this symbolic influence was precisely the point: control through perception, manipulation through fear, the exercise of power without physical intervention. Critics counter that this is an elegant story, but a story nonetheless, lacking verifiable evidence. By the late 20th century, the Illuminati had entered a phase of almost mythic recognition. Supporters felt vindicated in seeing their warnings and interpretations echoed worldwide. Critics maintained their skepticism but acknowledged that the legend had taken on a life of its own, inseparable from the cultural imagination. And as the world advanced into the digital age, with instant communication and global connectivity, the stage was set for the next chapter: challenges, debunkings, and the backlash that would test the resilience of the Illuminati myth in the 21st century. Because every legend, no matter how pervasive, eventually encounters scrutiny, doubt, and the search for truth. By the dawn of the 21st century, the legend of the Illuminati faced its greatest test. Supporters argue that increased scrutiny, research, and access to information did little to diminish the society's perceived influence. If anything, They claim skepticism itself became part of the conspiracy, a layer of obfuscation woven to protect the hidden cabal. Critics, however, insist that the proliferation of investigative journalism, academic research, and debunking websites expose a myth for what it was, a combination of imagination, fear, and misinterpretation. The rise of the Internet was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it provided believers a platform to share theories, analyze alleged symbols, and connect across continents. Forums, videos, and social media amplified the story, allowing the legend to reach audiences far beyond traditional print or broadcast media. On the other hand, it offered skeptics the tools to fact-check claims, provide historical context, and challenge narratives with evidence. Supporters argue that these challenges only intensified the fascination. A society powerful enough to manipulate public perception could also create skeptics to distract and mislead. Critics counter that the so-called challenges are exactly that, challenges, not evidence of secret power. Public fascination remained undiminished. High-profile events, economic crises, political scandals, celebrity controversies were quickly interpreted through the lens of Illuminati influence. Supporters claimed that symbols in music videos, corporate logos, and popular films were not mere coincidence but coded messages, revealing the society's continued reach into culture and media. Critics emphasize that such interpretations were often the result of pattern-seeking behavior, confirmation bias, and a natural human tendency to ascribe intentionality to randomness. Academic historians and investigative journalists began publishing detailed analyses, tracing the Illuminati's historical roots and debunking many of the more sensational claims. They highlighted that Adam Weishaupt's original society had been disbanded in the late 18th century and that no verifiable evidence linked modern events to the original order. Supporters acknowledged these studies but argued that they missed the point. The power of the Illuminati was not necessarily organizational. It was symbolic, psychological, and cultural. Critics insisted that symbolic interpretations cannot be equated with historical reality. Some governments and institutions even issued statements addressing Illuminati-related rumors, aiming to quell public fear. In some cases, this fueled further speculation. Believers suggested that denials themselves were carefully crafted to maintain secrecy. Critics viewed these reactions as entirely predictable, authorities responding to rumors and misinformation rather than acknowledging a hidden cabal. The backlash also extended to popular culture. Films, documentaries, and books critiquing the Illuminati narrative encouraged audiences to question sources, differentiate history from fiction, and recognize the psychological allure of conspiracies. Supporters often saw these works as proof of suppression and control, further embedding the narrative of hidden manipulation. Critics regarded them as part of healthy discourse, encouraging critical thinking and rational inquiry. By the early 21st century, the Illuminati legend had evolved into a complex ecosystem of belief, skepticism, and cultural symbolism. Supporters argue that challenges, debunkings, and backlash only reinforce a myth, making it more alluring and mysterious. Critics maintain that while the legend remains captivating, it is primarily a construct of human imagination, media amplification, and historical misinterpretation. And yet, despite scrutiny and skepticism, the Illuminati persisted, not as a tangible organization, but as a powerful symbol. Its enduring presence in public discourse, media, and imagination paved the way for the next chapter, lasting influence and cultural legacy, where the legend would shape society even without verifiable existence. Because when a story captures the imagination of millions, no amount of evidence can entirely erase it. As the 21st century unfolds, the Illuminati has transformed from a historical curiosity into a lasting cultural phenomenon. Supporters believe that its influence extends far beyond politics or economics. It permeates entertainment, literature, music, and even social movements. From blockbuster films to viral online theories, the idea of a hidden cabal orchestrating world events continues to captivate imaginations. Critics argue that this influence is symbolic rather than literal, a reflection of human fascination with mystery, power, and secrecy rather than evidence of an ongoing secret society. The music industry, in particular, has become a focal point for believers. They claim that pop stars and performers embed Illuminati symbolism in music videos, lyrics, and stage design, communicating covert messages to the public. Critics counter that the use of symbols as artistic expression, marketing strategy, or playful myth-making, not evidence of membership or control. Yet supporters argue that the pattern is too consistent to be coincidence, reinforcing the narrative of enduring influence. In literature and film, the Illuminati has become a storytelling device representing the unseen forces that shape societies. Historical novels, thrillers, and conspiracy narratives routinely feature secret societies pulling the strings of world events. Supporters believe these fictional depictions echo real-life influence, subtly confirming the Illuminati's presence in contemporary consciousness. Critics note that these stories are entertainment, often exaggerating or inventing connections for dramatic effect. Even in politics, believers point to patterns of decision-making, alliances, and economic maneuvers as evidence of a hidden guiding hand. Critics insist that human systems are inherently complex, and interpreting coincidence or conspiracy is a natural cognitive bias. Yet the legend persists, demonstrating that influence need not be tangible to be powerful. The perception of control, after all, can be as compelling as control itself. Globally, the Illuminati has transcended borders and cultures. Online forums, social media, and documentaries perpetuate theories, often mixing historical fact with speculation. Supporters believe that this widespread recognition indicates an enduring, almost omnipresent influence, proof that the society, in some form, continues to operate behind the scenes. Critics argue that the ubiquity of the narrative reflects the speed and reach of modern communication, not clandestine orchestration. The society's legacy is also psychological. Believers argue that the fear and fascination it inspires shape collective behavior, influencing the way people interpret authority, institutions, and historical events. Critics note that this is a social phenomenon, an enduring myth that serves as a cultural lens for understanding uncertainty and power. The legend has become a mirror, reflecting both society's anxieties and its desire to believe in hidden meaning. Supporters point to its integration into memes, games, and global pop culture as evidence of continued relevance. Critics maintain that these references are playful or symbolic, not indicative of real-world power. Yet the result is undeniable. The Illuminati exists in the cultural imagination, a force that transcends time and evidence. As the 21st century marches on, the stage is set for the final chapter, the question of immortality. How does a legend endure when its origin, structure, and existence remain contested? Supporters argue that the very ambiguity ensures survival, that a legend will continue to shape perception for generations. Critics insist that while stories endure, they do so in the realm of myth, not history. And so, the world moves toward the ultimate question, in a reality driven by information, influence, and imagination. How will the legend of the Illuminati continue to live on? As the 21st century unfolds, the Illuminati has transformed from a historical curiosity into a lasting cultural phenomenon. Supporters believe that its influence extends far beyond politics or economics. It permeates entertainment, literature, music, and even social movements. From blockbuster films to viral online theories, the idea of a hidden cabal orchestrating world events continues to captivate imaginations. Critics argue that this influence is symbolic rather than literal, a reflection of human fascination with mystery, power, and secrecy rather than evidence of an ongoing secret society. The music industry, in particular, has become a focal point for believers. They claim that pop stars and performers embed Illuminati symbolism in music videos, lyrics, and stage design, communicating covert messages to the public. Critics counter that the use of symbols as artistic expression, marketing strategy, or playful myth-making, not evidence of membership or control. Yet supporters argue that the pattern is too consistent to be coincidence, reinforcing the narrative of enduring influence. In literature and film, the Illuminati has become a storytelling device representing the unseen forces that shape societies. Historical novels, thrillers, and conspiracy narratives routinely feature secret societies pulling the strings of world events. Supporters believe these fictional depictions echo real-life influence, subtly confirming the Illuminati's presence in contemporary consciousness. Critics note that these stories are entertainment, often exaggerating or inventing connections for dramatic effect. Even in politics, believers point to patterns of decision-making, alliances, and economic maneuvers as evidence of a hidden guiding hand. Critics insist that human systems are inherently complex, and interpreting coincidence or conspiracy is a natural cognitive bias. Yet the legend persists, demonstrating that influence need not be tangible to be powerful. The perception of control, after all, can be as compelling as control itself. Globally, the Illuminati has transcended borders and cultures. Online forums, social media, and documentaries perpetuate theories, often mixing historical fact with speculation. Supporters believe that this widespread recognition indicates an enduring, almost omnipresent influence, proof that the society, in some form, continues to operate behind the scenes. Critics argue that the ubiquity of the narrative reflects the speed and reach of modern communication, not clandestine orchestration. The society's legacy is also psychological. Believers argue that the fear and fascination it inspires shape collective behavior, influencing the way people interpret authority, institutions, and historical events. Critics note that this is a social phenomenon, an enduring myth that serves as a cultural lens for understanding uncertainty and power. The legend has become a mirror, reflecting both society's anxieties and its desire to believe in hidden meaning. Supporters point to its integration into memes, games, and global pop culture as evidence of continued relevance. Critics maintain that these references are playful or symbolic, not indicative of real-world power. Yet the result is undeniable. The Illuminati exists in the cultural imagination, a force that transcends time and evidence. As the 21st century marches on, the stage is set for the final chapter, the question of immortality. How does a legend endure when its origin, structure, and existence remain contested? Supporters argue that the very ambiguity ensures survival, that a legend will continue to shape perception for generations. Critics insist that while stories endure, they do so in the realm of myth, not history. And so, the world moves toward the ultimate question, in a reality driven by information, influence, and imagination. How will the legend of the Illuminati continue to live on?